Well, hello, good day, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to let a lot of the attendees join the session. We're expecting many hundreds of people joining us today. I can see we're about 250 at the moment, so we'll let that number bump up a bit before we get started. So you've got time to go and grab that last cup of tea if you need to. And I can see the chat box is already nice and active. That's great. That's what we like to see. Okay, one more minute. Okay, I think we will get started. So again, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. So today, I'm Dr. Andrew McFarlane, but you can call me Drew. I think many of you will have spoken to me before. And my colleague, Dr. Dmytro Filchenko. Dmytro will be leading you through today's webinar. I'll give a little brief background about myself, and then Dmytro will do the same before we continue. So if you haven't heard me speak before, I'm the Senior Research Manager at QS, and I oversee the rankings offerings. Prior to joining QS, I was an academic. I worked in linguistics and psychology before joining QS a few years ago. Dmytro, would you like to give a short intro?
Sure, Drew. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Dmytro, and I'm leading a team of analysts who analyzing the ranking, various types of rankings, starting from subject rankings that we're discussing now, and ending with business rankings that we have in our portfolio. My background is computer science and applied mathematics, but of course, I apply all my knowledge now to the data analysis. So basically, we'll be happy to help everyone to understand our methodology better and our rankings results.
Thanks, Dmytro. And in the background today, we also have Samuel Wong. So for those of you that have written to rankings@qs.com or logged a ticket on support.qs.com, Sam is the man behind the team there, and he will be helping to deal with some queries or direct you to the right place for your questions. Okay. As always, we're going to start just reminding ourselves of QS's mission. I think it's vitally important when we're talking about rankings to remember why they exist. So QS's mission is to empower motivated people around the world to fulfill their potential by fostering international mobility, educational achievement, and career development. And one of the main ways we do this, of course, is rankings, providing objective, independent insights to students to help them achieve these goals. So, we rank for students, and that point can sometimes be forgotten. So let's keep that in mind as we go through today's presentation. QS gets broad coverage in global media. I took this from last year's media clippings, and you can just see some of the major news outlets in the world covering our rankings. And of course, we're looking forward to see the pickup we get for this year's subjects ranking. Let's just talk for a second about the purpose, the scope, and the reach of the ranking by subject. So QS World University Ranking by Subject is designed to highlight subject strengths of institutions around the world, looking at research and reputation in different combinations. So our World University Ranking ranks institutions overall. Our graduate employability ranking ranks institutions in their sort of, in their employability and the impact that they can make on their students' careers. Subject ranking is ranking them on their subject strengths, which is a huge sort of endeavor, as we'll see in a second. The scope of the ranking is that it's global. We look at institutions from both undergraduate and postgraduate and combined. And both comprehensive and niche institutions can feature. What do I mean by this? Well, in our World University Ranking, institutions have to teach in at least 2 of our broad faculty areas, which means certain institutions such as niche medical schools or niche art and design schools aren't eligible for the world ranking. In the subject ranking, they can feature. So in our subject ranking for art and design, you will see many institutions not featured in any of our other rankings, likewise for medicine, likewise for some of the science institutions. The reach of the ranking, I have to use last year's statistics because the launch has not happened yet. Actually, for those of you just that maybe aren't aware, we have about 50 minutes until the live launch of Subjects 2022. So on launch day last year, we had about 700,000 views on topuniversities.com. And over the sort of course of the publication, the sort of weeks and months from it, about 6,000 media clippings. Okay, so some highlights from this year's edition. There were 1,543 institutions in the ranking. We've added 1,500, well, over 1,500 new programs. What do we mean by programs? We mean a subject entry from an institution. So I'm in Glasgow, so if the University of Glasgow was not previously ranked in X subject, and it is now ranked in X subject, this is a new program. So that's how to interpret that statistic. We rank institutions in 51 subjects, and we introduced International Research Network as a new metric. Now, Dimitro, as the builder of this ranking, I think you can give us a bit of an idea about the background work that goes into this. What has to happen for these statistics to happen, Dimitro?
Yeah, so basically, I think what makes our subject rankings unique on the market is the fact that I think we are the only rankings that actually screen all institutions that we rank against if they offer or not an undergraduate or postgraduate program. So basically, we try to make sure that across all 17,700 institutions that rankings places that we're going to publish in 15 minutes, that all of them actually are providing the program in this or that subject. And this is an extensive screening done by our institution support team and by various algorithms that we utilize to achieve that. So I think this is kind of the biggest strength of and the unique strengths of our rankings. And of course, when you look at the number of subjects, so 51 subjects is also something very unique for the market. We also group these subjects into 5 broad faculty areas and publish rankings in all of them. So totally we have 56 different tables that are going to to be published very, very soon live. So yes, and of course, our unique set of indicators. We don't use any, let's say, institutional submitted data to us and any other data that can be, let's say, misinterpreted or submitted in a bad manner. So all indicators are, let's call it, objectively created indicators based on the objectively available data, research from Scopus and reputation from our in-house surveys.
Thank you, Dimitro. I think that's a good point, and just worth sort of reiterating that for this ranking, unlike, say, world or regionals, we're not using data submitted by institutions. It's research data that we're getting from Elsevier or reputation that we're getting from independent employers and academics around the world. Thanks, Dimitro. So looking at some of the data that has went into producing this edition, our academic reputation surveys this year had over 130,000 respondents. Our employer reputation survey, highlighted by a brief case, 75,000 employer responses. Our Elsevier data extract tracked 96 million citations coming from 14.7 million papers. It's a huge amount of underlying data feeding in to the ranking, which Dimitro and the team spend a painstaking few months analyzing and getting ready for you all. There are 3 new locations featured in subject ranking this year for the first time. We have Iceland represented, Armenia and Uzbekistan. So if there are any representatives from the universities from these places that have entered, congratulations on joining our subject ranking. And we hope to, of course, add more locations over time. I think one of the big questions a lot of people will have, and that we'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about, if I just keep my slides steady, is the introduction of International Research Network, or as we call it, IRN. This is going to be familiar to institutions in our regional rankings. We've been using this metric in our regional rankings for a number of years. It's been stable, it's enjoyed sort of widespread support. And we had extensive discussions with our Global Rankings Advisory Board over the last few years about expanding the use of this metric. And we decided to introduce it to the subject ranking this year at the broad faculty area. And Dimitro will say a little bit more in a moment about sort of, the mechanics of that. The metric also enjoys rather wide support from the university community. It's a popular indicator. I think part of that popularity comes from the fact that it's relatively stable, but also that it comes from objective data, Elsevier's Scopus data. Why do QS like this? And personally, I'm really in favor of this metric because global research collaboration is more important now than ever. There's a lot of problems facing the world, from climate change, technology problems, the aging population, the obesity crisis. Cancer remains one of the world's sort of biggest medical problems. There's hunger, there's poverty. And if you think of the UN sustainability goals, none of them will be properly met without global research collaboration. Academics are going to have to come out of their silos, out of their borders, to tackle some of this. And I think that's why at a sort of philosophical level, tracking and rewarding institutions for this is vitally important. So Dimitro, do you want to just let our audience know a little bit about the mechanics of this, please?
Sure, Drew. Yeah, so as you may know, International Research Indicator, or IRN, is not something new for the QS portfolio. So we use that indicator for the last maybe 7 years for our regional rankings. And we got a very positive feedback from the market on that. When designing this indicator, we try to achieve the following. So of course, we understand that if you produce more research papers, you will have more partners. But we, as rankings model designers, we didn't want to achieve the situation that this indicator will be highly correlated with, let's say, faculty number or CPP's citations per paper number or H-index number, right? And that's why this indicator was designed in a way that to reward and to reflect the ability of institution to diversify the geography of the international research network by establishing sustainable research partnerships with other higher education institutions, meaning that we look at the number of locations with stable enough partnerships, and we compare it with against the number of partners from these locations. And by sustainable partnerships, we mean partnerships with more than with 3 or more joint papers published during the last 5 years. So if your partner is stable enough in that sense, we count this partner and the location of that partner to the score for this indicator. You can find more information about this specific indicator on our website, support.qs.com. And we of course, happy to answer any questions regarding this. This year, this specific indicator was applied only for broad subject areas, 5 of them, and not to any of the narrow ones. However, in future, we are exploring the options to expand the list of indicators for narrow subject areas as well.
Thanks, Dimitro. Yeah, that's an important point. So the broad faculty areas at QS are arts and humanities, engineering and technology, life sciences and medicine, the natural sciences, and social sciences and management. So if your institution has been ranked in those broad faculty areas, then International Research Network is something that you would like to go away and consider the impact that it's had. But if you've been ranked in law, dentistry, philosophy, it has not had an impact, those 51 narrow subjects. So do keep that in mind, please. There are 5 performance lenses that go into the subjects ranking, and they are combined differently, as we'll see in a moment. So those performance lenses are academic reputation from the Global Academic Reputation Surveys, employer reputation from the employer surveys, H-index, citations per paper, and International Research Network. In other words, reputation and research. I'm not going to go into these in any detail today. It's well explained on support.qs.com, and I think very familiar to the majority of our sort of university community. We have updated the methodology definitions and weightings. I can leave that on the screen for a moment or so, and you can see the weight of IRN at those broad faculty areas and the readjustments of the other research indicators. And Dimitro, at the broad faculty level, the weighting for IRN was taken from other research indicators.
Exactly.
Not from the reputation indicators, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was redistributed from citations per paper and H-index, leaving academic reputation and employer reputation as it was before.
Yeah, thank you. And then this is the distribution of the weightings per subject. This is all available if you go to the subjects ranking page at support.qs.com. But I'll just pick a couple for those of you who are not sort of familiar with how this works. So if we look at a subject like art and design, which is 3rd from the left, you can see that 90% of the score for art and design comes from academic reputation, that sort of bluey purple color. 10% comes from employer reputation. So for art and design, there are no research indicators being used to score that subject. That is quite different if we compare, for example, let's say veterinary science. So veterinary science is around about the middle. We've got 30% academic reputation, 10% employer, and then my color vision. So then we've got 30% citations per paper and 30% H-index. And I have to tilt my head a little bit to look at that. So you can see that in something like veterinary science, and actually the majority of the sciences, we add more of the research indicators in there to get to the score. I thought it might just be interesting to take a look at the locations that are improving in this rank. And there's many ways that you can calculate improvement. So what we've done for the purposes of this slide, it's the locations with the highest share of improved ranks. So if somewhere has 100 entries in the subject's ranking, and 80% of those entries have improved in their rank, that's how this is being calculated. So we can see really strong performance from Indonesia, Mexico, France, Hungary, Poland, Pakistan, Argentina, Netherlands, and Turkey. This data will be made available on qs.com. So for those of you that enjoy a little bit of at-home analysis, you'll be able to down the subject's ranking, splice the data, look at improvements and declines, in a way that you would prefer to see it. Dimitra, do we have an estimate of when the shareable results will be available?
As you mentioned, Drew, we're going to publish the results as a web pages very, very soon. It's going to happen at 10 a.m. GMT time, right? And the shareable Excel files, which is also very convenient for our users, as we understand, to explore the result, will be available during the day today. So you will find those Excel shareable results either via qs.com website if you search for Excel subject rankings results, or if our web team will be ready for this today, you will see a download link in the bottom of every subject rankings page, and you can download it directly from there.
Great, thank you. Given that a lot of this ranking focuses on research, I want to zoom in a little bit and think about research from a slightly broader perspective. What does it mean to have strong research, and what sort of allows that to happen? This is a very interesting graphic produced by UNESCO, which is research spending as a proportion of GDP around the world. So on your x-axis, it's the percent of R&D expenditure, and on the y, it's researchers per 1 million inhabitants. But we're just going to focus on the percent GDP at a moment. So take a moment just to have a look at some of the places represented there. So on the top right-hand quadrant, you've got Republic of Korea, Japan, you've got Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, and the US. So if you sort of take that top right quadrant, just sort of remember some of the places represented there. And then if we look at this in table format, so the percent of GDP for research, and then the percent of that goes on to university spending. So you can see quite a lot of differences here. So for example, let's choose Japan spends 3.4% of its GDP on research, but of that, only 12% is going on to universities. So it's one of the highest as a percent of GDP, but actually the bulk of that research spending is not going towards universities. And you can contrast that with something like, let's say Sweden, which has a slightly lower percent of its GDP, 3.1% going in research, but almost 30% of that going on to universities. So again, if you just sort of familiarize yourself with some of the places and the proportions here, and then we'll look at our research indicators. So we have citations per paper on the left and H-index on the right. And what I've done is averaged the score per location for these indicators and taken the top 10 averages. So for all of the countries represented in the ranking, take the average of their citations per paper score per university, the average of their H-index score. And what I think becomes almost immediately visible is that the countries that are represented in our top 10 by average score are very similar to the countries represented in that top right quadrant of UNESCO. So we're seeing Netherlands, we're seeing Switzerland, Sweden, the United Kingdom, the USA, Denmark. In other words, for a country to improve in something like a subject ranking at QS, and particularly in the research networks, you would hope that there would be sort of sustained and considered investment at a country level towards that. That is clearly what's allowing these places in our ranking and the institutions from those places to excel in research. We've also taken a look at the data on research just to see what are the top research trends by citations. Now, our citations window is a 6-year period. We look at citations, 5 years of papers. So they don't tend to change much year from year. So actually, the top trends that we're seeing this year are very similar to the top trends that we saw last year. So, of course, research into the coronavirus is being hugely cited by global academics right now. Machine learning and artificial intelligence, climate models, and cancer and cell biology. So, you know, if you were thinking about perhaps which sort of area that you'd like your academics to be focusing on, or which departments, you know, might be the most impactful in terms of resourcing, these are the most highly cited. So you can take your own conclusions from that. Now I thought we would just look at some top 10s for some different subjects. We're definitely not going to go through all 51, but we've picked some that are, let's say, topical subjects of the moment. So of course, medicine, coronavirus, health outcomes, I think it's hugely important. And what we see in our medicine narrow subject is stability. The top 5 institutions are the same as the top 5 institutions from last year. A little bit more variation as we go down the rank, and congratulations to University of Toronto, who breaks into the top 10 this year. They've moved up 4 places on last year. Pharmacy, of course, also important, but I think interesting to note that the top 10 for medicine doesn't necessarily translate to the top 10 in pharmacy. So Monash from Australia taking the top place, up 1 from last year. And then we see, for example, University of Nottingham, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and UC San Diego moving a grand 10 places on last year's pharmacy ranking. Environmental sciences, of course, crucial in solving climate and a lot of the other sort of UN SDGs. Reasonable stability at the top there, but a really nice progress from UC Berkeley, moving up 5 places. And, you know, ETH Zurich, world famous tech institute, well represented as well. Politics, of course, I think this is a topic that is never not topical. There's always a hot political topic somewhere, and it's a reasonably stable subject ranking. Again, some of the names that we might not see in the top 10 in other rankings, for example, Sciences Po from France, Princeton, and then NUS from Singapore represented there as well. Performing arts, I thought would be really interesting to highlight, because as much as our rankings are designed for relative stability, it's not the case that each subject ranking is as stable as the other ones, and particularly where they involve reputation more than research, we can see quite a lot of movement. So, University of Music and Performing Arts, Vienna, jumps a grand 5 places to take second spot. And we're seeing Guildhall School of Music and Drama up 9 places, Curtis Institute of Music up 17. Dimitri, do you want to just comment a little bit on sort of the different reasons why one subject ranking would be more or less stable than the other?
Yeah, sure, Drew. So one important thing to note is that comparing to all other rankings that we have, subject rankings are exempted from the damping mechanism deliberately. In order to let the universities to shine brighter every next year, right? So this is the first reason why, in general, you may see a bigger movements comparing to our World University Ranking or regional rankings, for example, or graded employability ranking. The next thing is that yes, the biggest portion of stability to the rankings results we receive from research indicators, because research is something that you cannot improve quickly unless you have some errors in, let's say, Scopus or Scopus mappings or whatever, right? So the research indicators, and especially H-index and IRN in broad faculty areas, they play a substantial stabilization role. And maybe I will just have a couple of words regarding H-index as a stabilization factor. So we observed that there is a big difference between citations per paper and H-index. So when you look at citations per paper, it could be the situation that you publish a couple of papers during this paper window, and you've got an extreme amount of citations for those just couple of papers. And of course, your CPP measure, citation per paper measure, can go up just in 1 year. But at the same time, H-index cannot go up so quickly in just 1 year. And it's a measure of stability of publication and citation patterns. Right, so coming back to the original question of why some subjects may have less stability than the other ones, it's again because we don't use research metrics for a certain amount of subjects. For example, art and design, for example, performing arts, classics, right? So relying purely on academic reputation and employer reputation data, sometimes we have great improvements of the participation rates for some institutions and for even some regions. Of course, we're working hard on, spreading equally our efforts in advertising our surveys and attracting our survey responses, avoiding any geographical biases. And of course, this is part of our methodology as well. So we have country weights based on the number of respondents from the country and the performance of the institutions in that country. So all that is, let's say, analyzed during the publication of the rankings. So when analyzing purely academic reputation or employer reputation, there could be some big swings, and subject to those swings are analyzed carefully, and we make sure that those swings are not something artificial, but something naturally happened. We acknowledge that fact that, okay, the institution can move up or down in just 1 year. subject to all those assumptions as well, which we prove during the analysis.
Thanks a lot. So moving on from top 10s, what else can we learn from the research data? Well, what's quite clear when you look into some of the most cited topics is the cross-disciplinary approach to this. So we spoke a moment ago about IRN and how global collaboration, cross-border collaboration is sort of crucial, but actually cross-disciplinary work is, I would say, just as important. So in both economics and mathematics, what we've seen is a big focus on stock markets, stock volatility, and digital currency, of course, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. In physics and environmental sciences, a shared focus on sustainability and materials. In mathematics and computer science, sort of shared work on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in linguistics and computer science, work on speech recognition. Now, if you think about this from a sort of academics research perspective, there are other reasons why you might want to encourage cross-disciplinary work, and which might lead over time to an improvement in QS subject rankings. So I'm an ex-psychologist or linguist. If I publish a paper with another psychologist in a psychology journal, I have a sort of ring-fenced audience of psychologists who are going to look at and then, of course, cite that paper. If, as a psychologist, I choose to work with a physicist and we publish a paper that's of interest to both audiences, you've doubled or more the sort of potential audience of readership that you have, which of course increases the propensity for that to be cited. So by crossing disciplinary boundaries and by crossing border boundaries, you're actually increasing the propensity of citations, which is of course what we're looking for, citations as a measure of research impact. Reputation, what is it and how to improve it? I would say one of the most frequent questions we get asked in our support desk, and I'm sure Sam, who's in the background, would attest to this, is why did my reputation go up or down? And what can I do to manage that and fix it? Which is it's both a simple question with a simple answer and a complicated question with a complicated answer. You know, the simple question is, to improve your reputation, your university has to be good, and it has to be known to be good. Academics have to believe that it's good, and for academics to believe that it's good, it has to be good. It's a circular argument. You can see that in painting here, but that's the sort of simple, realistic answer. At a practical level, there are things that you can do as an institution to drive your reputation. So with academics, you want to have an effective communication strategy and plan how you're going to engage with global academics and how you're going to get the research that your institution does disseminated to that wider academic audience. You're going to have to meet with marketing and international offices and provide updates and have an active communication between research, marketing, and PR. You're going to want to cultivate a postdoc community or a fellowship community. And you're going to want to stream your knowledge, make research events visible online with partners and stakeholders. With employers, again, you're going to have an effective communication strategy linked to the employer market, the industry in your regions. You're going to want to showcase your university's scientific or technological excellence and how that can be of relevance to employers. Students are, of course, the easiest way of building relationships with employers. So showcasing what the university is doing to make students more employable, this sort of transferable skills that they're getting, the internship, the work opportunities, and leveraging the university's alumni network to become a global community who will act as brand ambassadors. These are all practical steps that you can take to drive your reputation. It will take time. Reputations are not built overnight. So, you know, institutions, you know, perhaps wanting to see a quick progression in QS rankings can often be disappointed because real progress takes time. What next for the ranking cycle at QS? Well, I think many of you will have received our email communication that we are planning to introduce a sustainability evaluation to the market later this year. So we are currently designing indicators that look at commitment to environmental impact, social impact, and good governance, with a view to launching a sustainability ranking in late 2022. The sort of ongoing plan is that this will combine institutional data, survey data, and country level data blended together to provide a sort of holistic and useful picture to students. Bear in mind, right at the start, I said that we design rankings for students. So any ranking that we create must be sort of easily understood and relevant to the student audience. Before I pass back to Dimitro, who's going to talk about some sort of engagement with universities and what you can do to help our future rankings, I just want to point you to support.qs.com. This is the rankings help desk. So you can find all of the information about our rankings there, including methods, data definitions, or policies and guidelines, badges. If your institution has been ranked, please go in and download the subjects badges. And at the sort of top right-hand side, you'll see a submit a request button. That is how you can get in touch with Sam and the team at rankings@qs.com. Dimitro.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. One of the questions that we receive about subject rankings is how to participate in this or that ranking. And the most important thing to know about it is eligibility criteria that we have. So in order to be included into the analysis, we, and of course, in order to be published in the RAND on the website, we need to make sure that you offer a program in this or that subject. This is for narrow subjects, and you are eligible for one of the faculty areas in order to be featured in the faculty areas ranking. So that being said, we need to make sure, for example, if you want to be featured in history, for example, we need to make sure that you offer an undergraduate program in history or a taught postgraduate program in history. To, let's say, get this information and to put it into the analysis, we often do web scraping and collect this data using our own efforts. But it would be very, very helpful for us and beneficial for institutions as well if you could provide this data during the year to us. So you can use this website, support.qs.com, and submit a ticket listing all available subjects in your program offering. So we have 51 subjects currently published on our website, and we need to have a proof link that you really offer at least one program in that subject. So if you could provide this list to us, this will help us to quicker include you into the analysis. And for you, the benefit of it is you will see the scores, the estimated scores in your fact file. Because if we are not sure that you offer a program and you are far away from being ranked in the publicly available ranges, most probably you won't see any score, so you will just see blank in your fact file. So it's kind of mutually beneficial for you to benchmark you against any other peers or against any other subjects using the fact file, and for us to include you into the analysis and to improve the scope of our analysis. Right, so this is for narrow subjects. And of course, using the same mappings between your programs and 51 subjects, we can make a conclusion about your eligibility in the broad faculty areas, right? So to be eligible in the broad faculty areas, we require you to have at least subjects in programs in at least 2 narrow subjects, right? So for example, in order to be eligible for engineering and technology as a broad subject, we need you to offer at least 1 program in any of 2 narrow subjects in engineering technology, for example, in computer science and in, let's say, chemical engineering, right? And by the way, the same eligibility criteria for broad faculty areas are utilized for our flagship rankings, World University Ranking. But just to remind you that in World University Ranking, we require the being eligible at least in 2 broad faculty areas, right? So to be ranked, to be featured in WR in World University Ranking, you need to be eligible or you need to offer programs in at least 2 broad faculty areas. This is the main difference between WR and subject rankings. Right, and if you let's say a bit confused about how you would like to, or how we would like to receive this information, or how you would need to collect this information, just message to us via support.qs.com, and our institution support team will supply you with a template how to provide this data to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Dimitro. And just before we move to questions, I'd just like to comment a little bit on how you should determine if your program offering is eligible. So we've had quite a few cases in the past where, for example, an institution would like to be ranked in business, but the program that they provide as evidence is something like business and management for biomedical engineers, or business and management for nursing. So what we would just ask is that if you're trying to get a subject rank, use common sense and sort of honesty when you're submitting it. Being ranked in business and management, you would expect the institution to teach the full range of business and management courses, from ops management to accounting to marketing and strategy to knowledge management, etc., etc. So having a program in, for example, nursing for management or management for nursing it's against the spirit of the subject ranking. So please do use common sense when trying to enter new programs. Okay. Well, I think it's time to try and answer some of the questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's see what we can help with. Someone was asking to take a screenshot of the previous slide. We will ask our marketing team to provide the slides, so you can take them from a hard copy. Someone is asking for a specific subject ranking. Well, you can find out in 13 minutes when it goes live. Please go to topuniversities.com, look for QS subject ranking. Will you send the presentation to the email? Yes, our marketing team will do that. Any question about why one institution is better and or worse than the other, I would really strongly encourage you to look at our methods first. So we have different indicators from other rankings agencies. And if you look at the score an institution receives in our indicators and look at their performance in another ranking company's indicators, you should be able to answer why they do better in one or the other. It's fairly easy to work out. If your question is not answered first by looking at our methods and doing a little bit of detective work, then please do submit a ticket to support.qs.com. But I think it's important that if you're engaged with rankings and you care about them, understand the methods and try to work out some of these answers. We've got a question from Raymond Tan, Dimitro. How strongly do reputation scores correlate with bibliometrics? I mean, I think we were just looking at this yesterday. As I understand, it's a moderate correlation. Would you agree with that?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So firstly, we don't expect to have really high correlation between indicators, right? So it's against let's say mathematical model designs, right? So you don't need to have too many intercorrelated indicators in one model. otherwise you can easily get rid of one of the indicator if you have another one in the model, right? So we're trying to avoid these situations of highly correlated indicators in one model because of the redundancy problem and other statistical problems that we may have in the models. However, the correlation range may vary across subjects, right? So the correlation is generally moderate, as Drew mentioned, but for example, you may expect to have a higher correlation, or let's say an upper limit of this moderate correlation for subjects like, okay, let's say chemistry, physics, mathematics. So all those subjects where the reputation is highly correlated with the research output. Okay, highly correlated, I mean, on the upper level of this moderate correlation. But you may expect a lower correlation in subjects like, for example, history, where some employment or employer reputation or even academic reputation can be something a bit different from citations or H-index. However, we acknowledge the fact that of course there is a correlation, and of course there is like no way to improve academic reputation if you don't have a strong research. Moreover, if you remember a question that we ask in academic reputation, we asking about, please identify institutions which you believe have strongest research and higher education performance in general. So research is part of the question that we ask in academic reputation. So it's all interconnected, but as mentioned, not to that extent that that's a linear correlation between those two indicators.
Thanks, Dimitro. We've got a question from Guna. Could you please clarify papers and citations period that was used for the Subject 22 edition?
Yeah, so basically, any 2022 edition of any ranking of any QS rankings is using the same paper and citation window. So paper window for 2022 editions of our rankings was 2015, 2019, and citations window is 1 year more, so 2015, 2020. And this was for WR, for subjects, for GR, for any other QS rankings labeled as 2022 ranking.
Mariam Amri is asking, is accreditation important to starting the QS ranking? For the general suite of rankings, so that's world, subject, regionals, and graduate employability ranking, no, accreditation is not directly important. Now, I'll qualify that a bit. If your institution has received a national accreditation or an accreditation from another provider, it's likely that there's an element of quality in your institution which might help you do better in the ranking, but there's no direct requirement. However, for the business school rankings for global MBA, online MBA, executive MBA, etc., there are accreditation requirements, and you can find out exactly what those are on the business school pages on sport.qs. So thanks for the question, Mariam. Any else you would like to take, Dimitro?
Yeah, we have a question from Lesjek. How is the stability of the university's IRN assessed? So I think, yes, I mentioned this word stability of the partnership. So let me explain it again. We count in IRN on the stable enough research partnerships, meaning that if you publish a joint paper, a single joint paper with an institution during the last, with another institution during the last 5 years, it's not enough for us to track this as part of the IRN indicator. So we require 3 or more joint papers during the last 5 years in order to include this partner into the partner count and the location of the partner into the location count. And of course, when I say during the last 5 years, I mean the last 5-year window that we use, so 2015, 2019 for papers.
There's a question in the chat that I think is a good one. It's from Nathalie Corney. Are the ASJC mapping codes that we build subjects with the same as the ones used to build faculty areas?
Right. So when we're talking about faculty area ranking, right? So our 5 rankings by broad subject areas, then yes, the same mappings as we used for WR. But of course, when we're talking about the narrow subject rankings, right? It's a completely different set of mappings because you need to understand which AGC code goes to nursing and which one goes to medicine, right? Yeah, but in general, yes, we don't change the mappings that were already used in the faculty area mappings for WR.
Thank you. Perhaps a question from Maurice Villarroel. Perhaps it was mentioned, for the citation score, do you only consider the top 100 journals in each field?
No, that's not the case. So we consider all journals. And we actually, in this indicator, we reward niche publications or publications in niche journals just to be our rankings by subject more specific to that subject, right? So we give more weight to the niche publication in niche specific journals. This is what we're doing. Also, we are rewarding institutions with a higher number of papers published in that subject just to avoid low number effect, right? So if you publish just a few papers and got an enormous number of citations, you will be penalized a bit by our method because you publish just a few papers, right? And if you publish a big amount of papers, normally we call it 10 times the publication threshold in that subject, and then you are not penalized, so everything is fine and you get a full credit of all your citations. And again, this all can be found on our website, support.qs.com.
Thank you very much. Mukesh said, do Indian primary institutes like the IITs suffer in QS rankings? Not really. They tend to do quite well if you look across the QS rankings where India is eligible, so the Asia ranking or indeed WR. The higher Indian institutions do tend to be the IITs, so I wouldn't say they unduly suffer, no. Will there be a transcript, Isabel? I think Samuel's answering that. Yeah, all questions about slides, yes, the marketing team will make these available, and I believe they will send them to the list of registered attendees. Minyan asks, are QS stars and QS rankings based on the same criteria? No, not really. You can look at the QS stars methodology on the website and you'll see that it's more of an audit-based approach. It's a rating system, so each university is kind of audited in detail across a much wider variety of elements, whereas the ranking is a sort of more like a heuristic, simple indicators that are globally applicable to all institutions. So no, they're really quite different. No problem, Morris. Mega Dooley is asking whether or not the REF, Research Excellence Framework, is taken into account for UK-based universities. It isn't. No, we do not take into account any external accreditation frameworks. So I hope that answers that question. Will data be available in XLS? I believe the answer would be yes.
Yeah.
The ranking is already online, says Ignacio De Lorenzo. Great news, Ignacio. Thanks for letting us know. We're busy in our webinar. We can't see the rankings. So yeah, the ranking is live, everybody. So please do go and explore and find out the exciting news for your institutions.
Yeah, we've got
Dimitro, is citation per paper on the level of single paper or referring to a journal?
So of course we analyze citations for every single paper that you published in this or that subject, right? And of course we sum up all that. So it's not on a journal level, right? So if you publish a paper in a journal and you attract citations from any other journals and even any other subjects, we still track these citations. So any incoming citations to a paper that you published, regardless of the source of that citation.
Thanks. Cesar, when can we expect more info on sustainability rankings? We sent a communication out. My memory is getting worse these days. I believe it was mid-March to institutions saying what the broad approach was. I think the point at which we'll have a more definite methodology will be closer towards summer, and then with a view to it being released probably around October time. But this will all be communicated to institutions with more definite details. And thank you for asking. I think we'll do a couple more minutes and then we will let everybody get back on with their days.
We've got a question from Thomas regarding the citation, possible manipulations and how we react on that. So firstly, we have a policy of self-citation exclusion, but just to remind all that by self-citation, we mean author level self-citation as it is in Scopus, because we use Scopus as a database. However, you know that there are other levels of self-citation, for example, organization self-citation or journal self-citation. So currently we're using this author level self-citation. So whenever the same author in a set of authors in the paper cited that paper, we exclude that self-citation. This is one method. Another method is, of course, any anomaly testing. So we do a lot of kind of bogus citations or anomaly numbers tests, and once identified, we normally communicate to Scopus and to institutions to clarify things.
We had a question in the chat from Munir Hassan. What do I have to do to be included in the subject ranking? Well, just to recap some of the things we've discussed today, you first need to be eligible. So you need to teach in the subjects, and we need to have evidence that you teach in those subjects. Then you will need to have a significant amount of research in order to enter. And then you will need to receive nominations from global academics and employers. So if your performance is good and it's recognized globally, and you're doing good research and you teach the programs and you let us know you teach the programs, then you're on the path to being ranked.
Jean is asking about H-index again. So yeah, so please confirm that you calculate H-index in a very special way. So you combine basically two H-indexes, and this is correct. We combine two H-indexes. The first one is the overall one based on overall sample of all papers, and the second one is the H-index calculated based only on the niche papers. And by niche papers, we mean papers classified by only one, but not subject, QS subject, but under one AGC code, because this is a bit different. So yes, I can confirm that, Jean.
Great. Okay. What about full research-based universities where there are no undergraduate programs, from Amadou? That's fine for the QS subject ranking. Institutions can be postgraduate only, but not for world ranking and not for regionals. Oh, so I can see Sam is already on the case with that one. Thanks, Sam.
Several people reported that Excel file is not available yet, so please bear with us and give our web team some time to make sure that the web version is stable enough on the website, and right after that they will upload the Excel version. So just please be patient with.
I think we will call it a day there. If you've not had your question answered and it's burning away at you, please go to support.qs.com and put a ticket in, and the Institution of Support team behind that will get that for you. But I think everybody would probably like to go and start exploring the latest subjects ranking. So thank you very much from me, Dimitro.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Wish you all the best and see you next time.
See you, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye.